This video series will attempt to prove many people are not blinded by Satan. They're guided by him. They're in league together. They know the truth and hate God and humanity enough to conceal it.
There is something more supernatural on the drawing board at CERN than what is being admitted. Even Adam Barker of Tech Bubble wrote of CERN a while back that with the LHC, CERN are expecting to find other dimensions and open portals to these dimensions. If you have the image of Stargate in your head right now, you're spot on. That's what he said.
The Large Hadron Collider is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. It consists of a 27-kilometer ring of superconducting magnets with a number of accelerating structures to boost the energy of the particles along the way. In other words, at CERN, they smash atoms together at such a high speed that they break off particles, and they study these in the attempt to open a fourth dimension.
And then he went on to draw parallels to the biblical story of Jacob's ladder. Perhaps you remember the dream that says, "Behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it." Then Jacob wakes up from his sleep and he says, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid. And he says, "How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven," Genesis 28. Now this ladder, described in the first book of the Bible, describes something like a portal from heaven to earth through which God's angels, interdimensional and spiritual beings from another reality, were traveling. When Jacob wakes up, he refers to the location as a gate, much like today's trendy terms gateway or Stargate. One of CERN's goals is to recreate Jacob's ladder, according to Barker, and to reopen a portal. Now, Sergio Bertolucci, who is the official director for research and scientific computing at CERN, he was asked a while back about this extra-dimensional doorway by the Register, which is a London and New York operated science and technology journal. And he didn't hesitate with an enlightening response. He said, "Yes, out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it."
What we see today is man's attempt to climb Jacob's ladder. And in this attempt, he wants to prove that he can be God and be as God by his own power.
If their agenda is unrelated to Bible prophecy entirely, then what is it with all this mystical symbolism that they knowingly are associating themselves with? Wouldn't it be more appropriate for them just to proudly display a polished statue of a particle or some artist depiction of the Big Bang instead of the statue of Shiva? For those who have not yet heard about this controversial piece of art that CERN proudly exhibits between buildings 39 and 40 near the main building of their operation, it stands as really the most visible and celebrated imagery behind their work, Shiva. This is the Hindu god of destruction. The plaque at the side beside the statue, however, reads in part, "Hundreds of years ago, Indian artists created visual images of dancing Shivas in a beautiful series of bronzes. In our time, physicists have used the most advanced technology to portray the patterns of the cosmic dance. The metaphor of the cosmic dance thus unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics." So right there out in the open for all to see is a direct correlation between the Hindu perception of Shiva hundreds of years ago, which is the concept of destroyer that I explained a moment ago, and our time, unifying, quote, ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics.
Something is going on.
You think everything's a conspiracy?
Everything is.
This video will touch on how man is so hell-bent on defying the King of Kings that they will go through any length to hide the truth from the masses. In fact, to hide the truth of Scripture, they have went to a lot of lengths to hide the fact that two of the most controversial subjects in the Bible, giants and dragons, are actually true. Let's first turn our attention to that of the giants.
The bones measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in a fair state of preservation. The skull was as large as a half-bushel measure. Some finely tempered rods of copper and other relics were lying near the bones. The mound from which these relics were taken is 10 feet high and 30 feet long and varies from 6 to 8 feet in width. The 2 mounds of lesser size will be excavated soon. This article from the St. Paul Globe, written in 1904, states, "Bones of a human skeleton 11 feet high are dug up in Nevada. Workmen engaged in digging gravel here today uncovered at a depth of about 12 feet a lot of bones, part of the skeleton of a gigantic human being. Dr. Samuels examined them and pronounced them to be the bones of a man who must have been nearly 11 feet in height." Apparently, these discoveries were something completely normal back in the day, and they weren't hidden from the public as they are today. The discoveries of giant skeletons weren't limited just to North America. This article talks of a giant's skeletons found in a cave in Mexico. The article reads, Charles C. Klepp, who has recently returned from Mexico, where he has been in charge of Thomas W. Lawson's mining interest, has called the attention of Professor Agassiz to a remarkable discovery made by him. He found in Mexico a cave containing some 200 skeletons of men, each above 8 feet in height. The cave was evidently the burial place of a race of giants who antedated the Aztecs. Mr. Clapp arranged the bones of one of these skeletons and found the total length to be 8 feet 11 inches.
If the Bible is true, man's claim to be the ultimate authority has just crumbled like a house of cards. If God is real, then he is the standard maker and the ultimate authority.
During the 19th century, there were many accounts of unnaturally large skeletal remains discovered in the ancient burial mounds scattered across North America. Today, not a single news media has ever mentioned a thing about ancient giants or past discoveries. If a giant skeleton is discovered somewhere, it would most certainly be classified and hidden from the public. It wasn't like that in the 19th and early 20th century, though. Almost every year, there were at least a few newspaper headlines stating the discovery of ancient giant skeletons. It seemed to be quite normal to find bones of giants in America when the first settlers dug ancient mounds to prepare for roads, farms, and buildings. The New York Times, in particular, wrote many newspaper articles about the discoveries of giants. Let's read through some of them, starting with this one titled, "The Bones of a Giant Found," which was published on May 25, 1882, and reads, "A skull of heroic size and singular formation has been discovered among the relics of the mound builders in the Red River Valley. The mound was 60 feet in diameter and 12 feet high. Near the center were found the bones of about a dozen men and women, mixed with the bones of various animals. The skull in question was the only perfect one, and near it were found some abnormally large body bones. The man who bore it was evidently a giant. A thorough investigation of the mound and its contents will be made by the Historical Society." Another newspaper from May 5, 1885 reads this, "Last week, a small mound near Homer was opened by some schoolboys who found a skeleton. Today, a further search was made, and several feet below the surface of the earth in a large vault with a stone floor and bark covering were found 4 huge skeletons, 3 being each over 7 feet in length, and the other 8. This article from the San Antonio Express is telling about a giant skull that is twice the size of a normal human, and there is also a picture. The article reads, "Beach giant skull unearthed by WPA workers near Victoria, believed to be largest ever found in the world. Normal head also found." That Texas had a giant in the beach in the long ago appears probable from the large skull recently unearthed on a mound in Victoria County, believed to be the largest human skull ever found in the United States and probably in the world. Twice the size of the skull of a normal man, the fragments were dug up by W. Duffin, an archaeologist who is excavating the mound in Victoria County under a WPA project sponsored by the University of Texas. In the same mound and at the same level, a normal-sized skull was found. The pieces taken from the mound were reconstructed in the WPA laboratory under the supervision of physical anthropologists. A study is being made to determine whether the huge skull was that of a man belonging to a tribe of extraordinary large men, or whether the skull was that of an abnormal member of a tribe, a case of gigantism. Several large human bones have been unearthed at this site. Another article from the New York Times, written in 1897, reads, "One of the 3 recently discovered mounds in this town has been opened. In it was found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size."
The Smithsonian Institution, an institution of art and science, an institution designed to be the world's largest museum.
This is on the history and social impact of science and technology. It's a collection of real things that relate to the real people of the country, not to the rich and famous, but to the daily life of Americans past and present. And can you imagine a museum that's not only free, but allows you to interact with the exhibits and put your hands on for some real learning that's fun as well as educational?
Right. This institution is the government's attempt to cover up those things that they wish were forgotten and they wish that were not true. To cover up those things that people have all over the country have brought to their attention by buying them up and hiding them from public consumption.
Although back in the days these discoveries were made public, once the discovered skeletons were brought to the respected museums and historical institutions, they completely disappeared and no one ever talked about them again. Here is a map of all reports of giants in North America. It's truly astonishing how many of them are there. Almost all of the discoveries end up in the Smithsonian Institute, and we all know how good they are at covering up major discoveries. There are also supposed reports of the Smithsonian purchasing giant skeletons excavated by citizens, which then disappeared, never to be heard from again. The Smithsonian even had a special division for exploring ancient mounds and supposed giant burial sites. One famous discovery of a giant which was also covered up by the Smithsonian is the San Diego giant from 1895, which was an 8-foot 4-inch tall mummified giant. There was even a picture of the giant mummy, which was shown in many newspapers. The mummy was inspected by many scientists. After his inspection, the San Diego giant was purchased by the Smithsonian. 13 years later, in 1908, when the mummy was being exhibited, the Smithsonian ran some tests and suddenly dismissed it as a hoax, saying it was made from gelatin. The fact that it took that long, and after spending so much money to acquire it, plus the fact that it was carefully inspected by experts 13 years earlier, does suggest there may be more to this story than meets the eye. According to the German newspaper Bild, an entrepreneur named Gregor Spory took a number of photos of a mummified giant finger in 1988. The owner of the finger was a retired grave robber who found the finger in an undisclosed tomb. The finger is nearly 14 inches long, and if it is genuine, it belonged to someone estimated to have been between 15 and 16 feet tall. The owner of the finger had a certificate to say that the finger was authentic, together with an X-ray image. Later, when Sporey returned to Egypt to purchase the finger, the owner had disappeared, leaving us only with the photographs of this discovery. The book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, tells us the story of an ancient giant race called the Nephilim. The story of the Nephilim Giants is further elaborated in another ancient manuscript, the Book of Enoch. Apparently, the Watchers, who were fallen angels, interbred with the women on earth, and as a result, the Nephilim Giants were born. We know that these ancient manuscripts describe the Great Deluge, a massive flood which, according to scientific data, really happened. If the biblical flood was real, could the Nephilim Giants also be real? The stories about giants don't end there.
Make three major points here. One is the rapid burial of most fossils, which says worldwide flood. If you know where they're buried, you know where they're buried under hundreds of feet of mud, it goes around the world, it has to be the flood. Giantism argues against everything starting off little bitty and getting more and more complex. So I have a lot of giant things in here to show that's just simply not true. This is a cast of a sculpture I made. A professor asked me to make one based on a report from a road construction guy in Egypt and Homs and Urianzora. I made myself a cast and did a drawing to fit this bone just to show how tall this guy would have been. His heels go down about 6 more inches, but the bottom of his rib cage is coming to 9'3". So how tall was the man? Let's say he was at least 14 feet, maybe more. He's the same size as King Og in the Bible. So what's the problem? A lot of creationists get all upset. King Og, you believe in King Og, don't you? And all the other giants that said they were as tall as cedar trees? How tall is a cedar? Well, it's at least 20 feet. This guy would look like a shrimp to them. But these are all over the place. So I wrote a book called Giants Against Evolution to show that, okay, if these things are in the past, why are they so huge? Why are we, the 6-foot guys here, at the top of creation? When you got these people out here that are maybe a few feet tall up to guys that are 20, 30 feet tall. That would mess up the old monkey to man lineup. That's the problem. Besides that, everybody knows the story about, well, everybody knew the story about David and Goliath. And that is in the Bible. Well, if that's true, you know, we can't be putting these giant skeletons up because they want to be talking about the Bible. That's the reason we have the museum here, the American Museum of Natural History, is to disprove the Bible. So giants are a huge problem for archaeologists, the paleontologists and all that, because they shouldn't be. So this guy here, this is us today. That's probably a Comanche Indian, and it might have been, I always thought he was 6 feet tall, but maybe he's more. Some of your ancestors.
Maybe.
But you know this whole ancestor thing? We have been told that people were so primitive, they finally came out of Africa, and they learned to make a flint arrowhead and say, ugh. Well, it's so much different than that. The evidence is so different than that. And the further back you go, the smarter people were.
The thing that have been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. Ecclesiastes 1, 9 and 10.
The Bible explains how God used Noah to save 2 of every kind of land creature that he had made, including the dinosaurs. Dinosaur kinds were probably represented aboard the ark as juveniles. Some of these families of great reptiles that came off of Noah's ark would have gone extinct in subsequent years due to the harsh climatic conditions, but others adapted or survived in remote tropical regions. As human civilization spread across the earth, men encountered these large reptiles and recorded their interactions. It became standard practice for ancient map makers to identify the unexplored regions at the periphery of their maps with the cryptic words, "Here be dragons." The word dragon appears 34 times in the authorized version of the Scriptures. Notice the words of the psalmist. You shall tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion, and the dragon shall you trample under feet. From the context, it is clearly speaking about a real creature that it would be impressive and intimidating to step on. Jeremiah 51:34 tells how the king of Babylon has swallowed me up like a dragon, which brings to mind the way many carnivorous reptiles gulp their prey whole. Both dragons of the sea, Psalm 74:13, and field, Isaiah 43:20, are mentioned. The Bible even alludes to the vocalization of the dragon. In Micah 1:8, I will make a wailing like the dragons. The fact that dragons were powerful, frightening creatures is demonstrated by the book of Revelation likening Satan himself to a great red dragon. Revelation 12:9. World Book Encyclopedia states, the dragons of legend are strangely like actual creatures that have lived in the past. They are much like the great reptiles which existed long before man is supposed to have appeared on the earth. Dragons were generally evil and destructive. Every country had them in its mythology. The truth is that the fathers of modern paleontology used the terms dinosaur and dragon interchangeably for quite some time. Sir Richard Owen coined the term dinosaur in 1842. Before that, all scientists called the great reptiles dragons. The Chinese have the oldest intact civilization. Their stories of dragons and some of their ornamental pictures of dragons are remarkably like dinosaurs. Books even tell of Chinese families raising dragons to use their blood for medicines and highly prizing their eggs. It is interesting that the 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac are all animals, 11 of which are still seen today. But is the 12th, the dragon, merely a legend, or is it based on a real animal, the dinosaur?
Look now at the behemoth which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now his strength is in his hips and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His bones are like beams of bronze. His ribs like bars of iron. He's the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. So this is a massive creature. If you keep reading the context, he goes out into a flooding Jordan River and has no fear. He's in amongst the reeds and the lotus trees, hardly give it shade. It's some sort of massive creature here. But I love verse 17. And the reason that I love verse 17, he moves his tail like a cedar, is because some Bible commentaries footnote this and say, oh, well, maybe this behemoth was an elephant or a hippo. Not really an elephant or a hippo? Have you guys ever seen a cedar tree and how they move? Okay, I mean, it might kind of sway over a little bit, if it's really windy, but I just thought, man, I'm not seeing that for an elephant. Y'all want to see this tail moving. This tail would start here and it would whip up really quick, trying to knock insects off its back. It's just flopping around like a weeping willow, trying to knock those things off. This is in mid-stride right here. I thought, that's not moving the way a cedar would move. It's more like a weeping willow, of course. Well, what about a hippo? That thing hardly has a tail. That's just a little flap of skin. Woo woo. A tail that moves more like a cedar, something like this. I got it bent around to fit on the illustration. Does that work? No. What about this one? Not happening. It actually fits a creature a little bit more akin to something like a sauropod dinosaur.
So then, what will man do next as he endeavors to be God himself and to reach heaven in a way not prescribed by God, by fate, but by his inventions, by his brain power, by his technology? For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Therefore, whatsoever ye have spoken in darkness shall be heard in the light, and that which ye have spoken in the ear, in closets, shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. As we get closer and closer to the day when Christ will return, let us not be ignorant of the devil's devices and of his schemes and those things that he seeks to hide from our eyes, but are clearly revealed in the pages of God's Word. The truth is there to set us free, if only we'll open our eyes to the truth and realize that there is a Creator who is telling us that everything that is written in His scriptures and His Word will come to pass as prophesied.